What's going on, everybody? This is Black Men Sundays. I'm your host, Corey Sylvester Murray. We're talking about generational wealth, mental health, finance, and business.
It's a Black Man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away. I refuse to be the man I was yesterday. Gotta put my best foot forward and elevate.
And on today's show, we're talking to Sam Dolcine. This brother's the host of Black Real Estate Dialogue Podcast, the 2023 Plutus Award for Best Real Estate Content. This brother's coming to us from Los Angeles, California, by way of Brooklyn, New York. This brother owns multiple properties, and we're going to get into that. So without further ado, Sam Dolcine, welcome to Black Man Sundays, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Definitely, man. And before we talk about the podcast, I want to talk about generational wealth. We've had brothers on the show because I always come out the gate and I ask, what's the best way to develop generational wealth over time? A lot of brothers say real estate, stocks, life insurance. The brother last week was big on life insurance. So let's start with that. In your opinion, what's the best way to achieve generational wealth?
So in my opinion, I would say real estate is first, but then right behind that, I would put stocks. And this opinion is unpopular. In my opinion, majority of people should not be investing in single stocks. People should invest in index funds. I mean, you set it and forget it. The market grows year over year. So that's another way to build wealth. And I think a life insurance policy as well. And again, there's like a whole slew of life insurances, but for the everyday person, a term policy could really help your family towards the end of your life. So I think a combination of those three works. Now, the extent of, how people go into those different directions is really up to you. However, what I like to tell people is that one house can change your life. So even if somebody bought one house, even if it wasn't a rental property, even if it was a house they just lived in and they just stayed there, right? If they, you have your assets and all that stuff organized, over time is going to go up in value. And at the very least, whoever's behind you, whether you have children or not, whoever you leave your assets to or your asset to, they'll at minimum have a property that has appreciated in value that they can sell and use the money for whatever they need to, or they can rent it out, or they can live in it. So it doesn't have to be a crazy amount of things that people do. You really can keep it very simple, and you don't have to be this big real estate mogul. You could have one house. You could never be a landlord, and the next generation is going to be set up.
Great information. I could tell you're a podcast host. You have a good voice and you speak very well, brother. So let's go a little deeper, man. You own multiple properties in the Midwest. How did you set that up?
Yes. So in 2018, so 6 years ago, around this time, funny enough, I was at work. At the time, I was working at a school, and I decided to look at my retirement plan. Why? I don't know. Maybe I was bored. So they have these calculators where you basically press a button. It says at 67 and a half, if you make your raises, whatever the case is, right? We predict you'll have about this much in your retirement based on your contributions. The second question said, okay, how much do you want to live off of? And I put what I thought was a very modest number. Long story short, the money was going to run out in less than 10 years. Okay. And with the life expectancy as it is now, that wasn't going to work. And so I said, I have to figure out a way to make money outside of my job. I'm not making that much money now. I heard real estate. I heard about real estate. I heard you can make money in real estate. So I reached out to the person in town who I knew, hey, I want to get into real estate. I heard you can make money. He said, Sam, fill out this form. I want to get understanding your finances. There were two problems. The first problem is you don't make enough money, Sam. The second problem is your debt to income ratio is too high. I had student loans like every other American, right? And so long story short, I said, this is not going to work. I can't buy anything here in LA, in California. And I discovered through literally searching on Google that people were investing out of state. The next 12 months, I tore apart every piece of information I could and did everything I could from a financial perspective to put myself in position. And the following year, I was able to buy that first property, and happy to share any more detail about that. But that is how I got started. I couldn't afford to invest where I lived, and I needed to make more money to ensure my retirement wouldn't be destitute, and out of state was the answer.
Well, you're making this easy because that was my next question. So what are the best ways to do research when you're looking for properties out of state?
Absolutely. So a few things you want to look for. So obviously, if you're coming from a place like anywhere on the coast, if you're coming from anywhere on the coast and you look, for example, in the Midwest or some parts of the South, you will be astonished by how cheap these properties are. The problem I see is a lot of people stop there. They're like, wow, it's cheap. I see properties for 80,000, 90,000. That must mean I can make money. That must mean I should just buy this, right? That's the wrong way to go about it. So obviously price is the first thing. And then the asset type. Do you want a single family? Do you want, 2 to 4 units? That's the second thing to figure out. The third thing, what is happening in that city, right? And what I mean by that is, are there jobs coming there? Is the city investing in itself, right? Are they improving their infrastructure? And it's very easy to find this information because anytime a city has developments going on, they want people to know about it. Why do they want people to know about it? Because they want more money. They want more residents coming to the city so everybody can benefit. So it's easy to find that information. The next thing you want to do is figure out, okay, can I actually make money? And what I mean by that is you want to run your numbers. You want to look at some sample properties within your criteria and see if you can actually make money. And the way you do that is you see the price of the home or what you would be willing to pay for the home, and you see what you can rent for. You see what your expenses would be, your property management, your maintenance, and I have a calculator that I use that kind of has a formula to help you understand if you're going to cash flow. But before you get started, you want to know if you're going to be able to cash flow that property. The next thing you want to do is build your team. Your team comprises of, at a high level, your real estate agent or whoever you're using to find deals, your lender, who's going to lend you the money to purchase the property, your property manager. I self-manage, but I honestly recommend everybody just get a good property manager. So your property manager, your inspector. Your inspector is going to thoroughly, if they're competent, help you understand the condition of the property before you even decide to proceed with it. So those are some members of your team. And then if you're doing a rehab, your contractor or handyman. But at a high level, those are some folks that you want on your team, and those are some things you want to do before you decide to invest in a property out of state.
Got you. And speaking of investing out of state, what would you say are the top 5 or 10 states that, we should, take a look at?
Yes, good question. So personally, I invest in Dayton, Ohio. There still are opportunities out there. What I've noticed in the market there currently is the prices are going up. And the challenge with the prices going up is that there's less cash flow from, at least from what I've seen right now. The inventory may change over time, but it's getting harder to find deals. But that's a place I would consider. Cincinnati, Ohio is another place I would consider. Indianapolis is another place I would consider. Indiana has fairly low property taxes comparatively to other areas, but Indianapolis, I've even heard folks talk about Fort Wayne, Indiana, some parts of the South, so Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. I've heard some good things about there. The Northwest Arkansas area, I've heard good things about, but I think the prices there are going up as well. St. Louis, Missouri is unsung, in my opinion. A lot of good opportunities there and a lot of good developments there happening in the city. So I would say those are some places to start. However, in the Midwest and the South, generally speaking, there's some good opportunities out there. And it's all about timing, right? Because every market over time is not necessarily going to be a great place to invest, because sometimes it just grows and develops to the point where you can't really, it's harder to make money in that area. So, I'm kind of experiencing that now to an extent in Dayton, but those are some places I would start. Illinois, you may want to consider as well. I've heard good things about Chicago, as well as Springfield as well. And one thing you want to keep in mind is the landlord tenant laws as well. So there are states and cities where they are more friendly to landlords. So Ohio is one of those places where it is very friendly to landlords, actually. Illinois, not so much, but these are things you want to look at as well, because California, where I'm at, it's very tenant friendly. New York, very tenant friendly. And as a new landlord, you may want to think twice. I'm not going to say not to, but you may want to think twice before investing in a place that's very tenant friendly, because in certain circumstances, it's not going to work out in your favor.
I got you. So I didn't hear you say Florida.
Man, Florida is too expensive for my taste. It's some of the cities in Florida, man. It's on fire. It's on fire, which is good depending on the seat you're in. But yeah, Florida, perhaps there's pockets there. I'm sure it's a big state. I'm sure there's pockets where there's still opportunities, but Florida can be tough, especially South Florida.
Yeah, and I had to ask you that because I'm in Florida, and I do a lot of news stories on the housing crisis, home
Yeah.
insurance.
Hmm.
People are getting dropped from their companies because their roof
Hmm.
is 6 years old, and they're like, "It's 6 years old. I'm not about to buy a new roof." So, and a lot of people that when I interview, especially the retirees, are saying, I'm retired, I'm on this set income, I can't afford it. So a lot of people are starting to move out of state. So I'm glad we spoke about the out of state investing. But one more question with that. What
Hmm.
research tools are best to use for researching out of state?
Yeah. So one thing I would do is leverage Facebook groups, specifically the investor Facebook groups for the city that you're interested in. And a lot of times you don't even have to say anything. You could just scroll and see what people are talking about. You can search different things. So if you're looking for, let's say, inspectors or agents, or just looking to get some insight on the market, whatever search term you're thinking about, you can just put it in the search of the Facebook group and get your question answered. And if you want, you can post, you can introduce yourself. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to network with people, etc. And so that's one thing that I would strongly suggest is to leverage Facebook groups. And then outside of that, Google will be your best friend. Like I said, a lot of this information is readily available, and the cities always want to publicize this information when good things are happening. So, it's simpler than people think doing all the research. It can just be a lot to comb through it and figure out, what's legit, what's not. That's the part that can take some time.
Got you. And let's go back to your multiple properties in the Midwest. So we've already discussed how you set the first property up. So how did you get the second and the third property?
Yeah, so I purchased the first property in 2019, and it was a tremendous learning experience. And so I actually didn't buy anything for 4 years after that, to be honest. Just, learning what it was like to be a landlord. And the philosophy I have is very different from a lot of people who I know, actually, or people who are out there. I look at it over a long-term period of time. I'm not trying to buy 5 doors in a year, 10 doors every year. Like, that's not me. I don't want to deal with all those headaches, to be just transparent with you. I'm looking at building it over time. And that's actually what I encourage people to do as well, because we're in a space online, and I've honestly become disillusioned with it, where people want microwave success. People want things overnight. And odds are you're going to live longer than you think in most cases. And you can wait. You can wait. So to that end, I noticed that interest rates started going up again. And, we know how crazy they've been over the last couple of years. But at the end of 2022, I noticed that interest rates were really going up and people were withdrawing from the market. And I'm like, you know what? We got this first property. Let's repeat this process again, and let's see what opportunities are out there and get back into the game. And so I closed on the next property at the beginning of 2023, and it was in this, in Dayton, different neighborhood. But to me, I thought it was a great time because everybody was running away from real estate. And so I'm like, you know what? Everybody's scared. If I can find another opportunity, I'm going to go for it. And that's what I did. And to me, I'm looking to stack my chips over time. Like I said, when it's time for me to buy again, I may have to end up buying somewhere else. But the formula I have, it works wherever, right? The fundamentals are the same. It's just a matter of the numbers, right? If the numbers no longer make sense, next time I'm ready to buy in Dayton, as much as I would prefer for it to be there and just grow there, then I'll go to another city. There's always going to be another opportunity, which is why, I'm always reading, I'm always looking at what's going on in different areas to see where is the next best place to invest. And, that's what I plan to do over the long term. And, I really want to encourage people to not rush, right? You can take your time, and everything is not always as it seems. A lot of people who have those 60, 70 doors are not making any money. The way I structure my properties, I'm looking for the highest amount of cash flow with the fewest doors. I don't want 50, 60 properties. For what? I want to make the most money with the least number of properties. And that's going to mean it's going to take me longer to find the right properties because I'm looking for something very specific. And I just really want to encourage people not to be discouraged by the vanity metrics. Doors are a vanity metric. You'd be surprised how many people have a lot of doors and they're not making money. They're really not making money compared to somebody with 25% of the doors they have, but they're managed better and they're more profitable and they make more money than the person who has 4 times as many doors as them. A lot of people don't know that. So just want to make sure I share that too.
Great. And also I want to talk about when you got to the second property, how did you finance it? Like, did you live in the
Mhm.
first property for a year and then rent that out and use that income to finance the second property?
Good question. Good question. So I neither of them are properties that I ever occupied. However, for the first property, I did two things. So I put my student loans into forbearance, so I didn't have to pay them for a year, and I was paying a lot of money. So it helped me save a good chunk of change. And then I also borrowed from my retirement plan. So I was able to borrow a certain percentage of it, and those two things helped me come up with a down payment. And then on the second property, similarly, use retirement funds to purchase that property as well. And and yeah, that's how I did it on both of those things. And I can't tell people what to do with their funds, but look into the options that you have. For the first property, I was at a point where it's like I was desperate. I'm like, look, I need a way out. I need to do something over time that's going to benefit me. And I'm like, you know what? I can borrow from this. There's no penalty to borrow from it. I can afford to repay it. If this is going to help me get a year ahead of this goal, then let's do it. So that's how I funded both of them, and just traditional 20% down on those properties as well.
Let's talk about some financial issues in owning multiple properties.
Yes. So people think real estate is passive, and it's a lie. It's not passive. And the way I'm doing it, I'm self-managing. It's even less passive, especially when there's a vacancy. And so some of the financial issues people can run into is not having enough reserves. And what I mean by that is there are two types of investors. The first type of investor gets the cash flow, they pay their mortgage, and they build up their reserves, or you could even call it the emergency savings for their properties, right? They're not spending the money on themselves. They're letting it build up for a rainy day, just like you would for your working income, right? Because things are going to come up, things are going to happen. You're going to have to pay for stuff. Okay. So the financial issues that can come up are when there's vacancies. And eventually you're going to have a vacancy and you don't always know how long it's going to take to fill it. And so I had a vacancy for a few months, just actually had somebody move in like 2 weeks ago to that second property, had to do some work. And, I take my time to make sure I find the right person. And who has to pay for everything in between? I do. But here's the thing, I didn't go into my pocket because I didn't spend a dime of the rental income I gained over the past year on myself, right? The tenants who were there before, they paid for everything. And now somebody's in there, I'm going to let those reserves build back up. So the financial issues you can run into is if you don't have reserves. Like having reserves is something I stress even before buying a property. And people get mad at me. People get mad at me, but I say before you buy a property, you should have 3 to 6 months of reserves for when things happen. Because let's say, for example, you buy a rental property and your monthly expenses all in, let's just say for round numbers sake, is $800 a month. I would strongly suggest you have a minimum of $2,400 set to the side after you have all your acquisition costs for the property, because you don't know how long it's going to take for you to find a tenant. You don't know how long they're going to stay there. And the worst thing you can do is put stuff on a credit card or have to go into your own pot, have to just do something crazy to get the money to fill those gaps in. So again, something people don't talk about a lot, but it's very important to have those reserves. And if you don't have those reserves, you're going to have a lot of financial issues.
So, what are some ways to get passive income in under a 4 to 6 month time frame,
Yeah. So in terms of like real estate,
or just anything? I mean, it could be
yeah.
real estate or just anything that that you would say that would be a good tip.
Yeah. So real estate is something, even if you have a property manager, I would say it's semi passive because I wouldn't encourage anybody to be 100% hands off. Even if you have a property manager, you want to check in, you want to make sure things are going as planned. You might even want to get another person to check behind the property manager just to make sure, everything is going well. But I would say if people are seeking truly passive income, you might want to get into something like, dividend stocks, which really takes a lot of money for you to really make anything. But dividend stocks or, investing in index funds where you pretty much set it and forget it and ride the wave of the market. But if you're looking for 100% passive income, I would consider something like that. With real estate, if you are doing it in the traditional manner, like if you're doing syndications, things like that, that's like completely passive. But if you're lower on the totem pole within a syndication, you don't have any control. You're just hoping that the operators do what they're supposed to do. So that's another way if you want completely passive, maybe considering a syndication as opposed to, regular residential real estate 1 to 4 units, or working with partners where you're the passive one, even if it's 1 to 4 units, that's something you can set up as well. Obviously you got to make sure the numbers work and all those things, but that's another way you can do completely passive, or you can do investing in real estate investment trusts, which have some similarities to dividend stocks, but you're not actively managing anything in that way. But to everything there's like pros and cons, and you just got to figure out if you want to contribute at all, if you want to be involved at all, or if you want to kind of set it and forget it. So I would start with that, what kind of investor you want to be, and then from there you have to choose which path you think will work best for your lifestyle and how involved you want to be.
Talking about the passive income though, like if I have a 4 to 6 month strategy,
Mhm.
what options should I think about first?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, how much money do you have? Like, how much money do you have that is investable outside of your personal emergency fund, which everyone should always have between 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. So if that's set and you have investable cash, how much do you have? If you have 10,000, you're probably not ready to invest in real estate just yet in a way that's really going to make you money. But let's just say you have 25,000, right? Now, depending on where you live, that could mean you could do something within your area where you live or not. So let's say you live in an area where 25, 30,000 could get you into a house. What I would consider is buying, I wish I could have done this, but what I would consider is getting a multifamily property, living in one of the units, renting the other one out, if you are comfortable with living with tenants. And even in that situation, you can get a property manager if you don't want to deal with people and you just want to, be a tenant, if you will. So that's something that I would consider just to start off, just to get your feet wet, if it's feasible for you where you live. And if not, then I would consider investing out of state. And if you're in a position where the investable cash you have is not enough to really do anything, then I would strongly encourage you to do everything you can to maximize your income. I mean, there's only so much you can cut out, right? But I would do as much as you can to maximize your income, build up that savings. And while you're in that waiting period, learning as much as you can about whatever your desired strategy is. So for someone who has the cash, you could feasibly do something with it in 4 to 6 months, whether it's like investing locally or out of state. You're in the game. But if you don't have enough cash, your focus should be increasing that cash and learning as much as you can in that waiting period.
This is Kalali out of Maryland. You mentioned earlier that you also do your own property management, but seems like you wouldn't recommend that for somebody trying to get in. Why is that?
Great question. Thank you for following up on that. So when I first started, I did have a property manager, and I just didn't have a great experience with that particular property manager. And the reason that I chose that property manager is because they didn't charge me to place the tenant. And typically, property manager might charge anywhere between, let's say, like 75 to 100% of the first month's rent, sometimes even 50%, to basically as a finder's fee. So if the rent is 1,000, you might get charged anywhere between 500 to 1,000 to get somebody placed, right? So I went to visit there for the first time because I didn't see the property in person until maybe like a year later. And I was trying to just, get access to the property, like check it out, like check in with the tenant or whatever, which is debatable whether I should have done that or not. But you know, they were acting like I was a nuisance. And I'm like, wait, I'm paying you. I own this property. Like, I'm in town. I don't ask for much, but I felt like I was being dismissed. And there was another incident during that time when, quite frankly, the fence collapsed. The fence on one side of the yard collapsed. And I didn't know about it until they sent these monthly statements. And in one of the statements, they actually started including the tenant inquiries. And I saw a note saying, hey, the expense, et cetera, et cetera. So I sent somebody like, hey, take a picture, show me what's going on. So they didn't tell me about that. And then it took forever to rectify it. So a friend of mine was like, yo, just try it. If you don't like doing it yourself, just get another property manager. But the reason that I would recommend a property manager to someone else is because, especially if you're out of state, is because if they're competent and if you vet them thoroughly and ask all the right questions and to the greatest extent possible, make sure that they are good and legit, it'll take a lot of headache away from you. Like you won't have to hear from tenants, not that they reach out all the time, but when things do happen, you won't have to hear from them. And someone else is just taking care of all of the things for you. So that's what I would say from a time perspective. It it saves you some level of time, and you can be a little more passive. So that's why I would recommend it. And self-management is cool. Like it's not difficult, especially when there is a tenant in there. But a lot of the challenge rises when there's a vacancy and you have to do a bunch of things that the tenants were taking care of, for example. So I recommend property management, but if somebody wanted to try self-management, the beauty of it is if it's been like a month or two and you're like, you know what, I hate this, you could always get somebody. And vice versa. If you have a property manager, most times you just have a certain amount of notice you got to give them before you take over if you want to. So I encourage people to try what they feel is best, but I think going with property management usually is a good bet.
Okay, cool. And how much, I guess, money, what percentage of money in terms of revenue would you say set aside for a property manager?
Good question. So I would say anywhere from 8 to 10, 11% typically is standard. So for example, if the property was renting out for $1,000, then they would take 80 to like $100 per month as their fee. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are potentially other fees as well. So I already mentioned the tenant placement fee, but something else is, some property managers charge for service calls. So if they got to send somebody out to the property, they might charge you for that. Or if there's a project that needs to be done at the property, they might charge a certain percentage on top of that or something like that. So there's other fees that can come up. They really vary depending on the property manager. So I would say it's very important as well to factor those other potential costs into, but typically 8 to 10% of the gross rent.
That's good to know. Now, you also said obviously property manager is part of your rental team. So like, because what I was considering doing at one point was just becoming a real estate agent myself. Would you like recommend trying to do any of these jobs like on your own if you had a skill set to do it, or is it the same as the property manager where it's like actually it's probably just better for you to just hire somebody to go do it for you?
Honestly, I know a handful of people who have investors who have their real estate license simply so they could represent themselves and keep that commission, right? So, I would say it doesn't hurt. Like if that's something that you want to do, like let's say for example, you're in Maryland, I think you said. So if you wanted to buy a property in Maryland and you decide to get your real estate license, I mean, it's better for you, right? It's less money you have to put out to, buy the property and fewer things need to work out. So I don't think it's a bad thing if you would prefer to get your license. I've thought about getting my license just to, not even for me to like buy and sell necessarily, but just to like refer out to other agents. Cause I have, a pretty big audience. I'm sure I could like funnel people to agents throughout the country or whatever and just get part of the commission. But, if it's something you want to do, I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Yeah, but I go back and forth on it, like, because I heard positive and negative. Like some people like, yeah, go ahead and do it, and other people like, nah, don't even bother with it. Just go buy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
Yeah.
I've heard different things on it, so it's good to try
Mhm.
to get some of that insight. Now, in this particular market, we know this has been a difficult market. We hoping that soon, with some of the recent interest rate cuts, that the market will get a little bit easier. Do you still recommend right now as the time to get into the market and try to buy a property, or would you recommend waiting for a while?
Good question. So I would say now is always a great time for somebody. Is that somebody, the person who's listening? Maybe, maybe not. And here's what I mean by that. So, for example, if you are in a place like California, for example, there's a property maybe a few blocks from where my wife and I live. It just sold 3 bed, 2 bath, less than 2,000 square feet for like 1.1. right? It's still more expensive than it was 4 or 5 years ago, significantly more expensive than it was 4 or 5 years ago, regardless of the interest rates, right? So I think it depends on where you are, to be honest with you. The challenge here that we're having is the price of homes have increased astronomically in the last 5 years. That's the biggest issue we have. It's not the interest rates, actually. People think it's the interest rates, but it's really not. I think rates are about around 6 right now. They did get as high as 8 or so, right? So it's good that those have come down. But the problem that we're having is the price. So it really depends on if you are in a financial position to purchase whatever it is you desire to purchase and you can afford it, whether it's a personal residence or whether it's a rental property that's still going to cash flow, then yeah, it's a good time for you. But if whoever's listening, if your finances are not such that you can get into the market right now, whether the interest rates were 1%, then it's not the right time for you. You might have to wait it out a little bit. But if people are waiting it out, thinking that we're going to have a crash or thinking that we are going to have prices decrease dramatically, you're in for a rude awakening. And in certain pockets of the country, prices have corrected and adjusted a little bit. But the overwhelming reality is that prices are still, in large part, much higher than their pre-2020 prices, right? So that's the dilemma that we're having. And it's tough. It's really tough for a lot of people out there right now. And I encourage people to do your best to think outside the box, right? So, an example of thinking outside the box, we already talked about investing out of state, but let's say, for example, you are in a position where you need to get something for your family, right? Maybe you have a sibling who also has a family who has been trying to get into the market and they just can't. Maybe for a short period of time, you get a duplex that's large enough to fit both of y'all. You go in on it together. Obviously, you figure out the paperwork and all those things. Or in some cities, they even have like two houses on one lot and they consider a multifamily. Maybe you do it that way, right? We're just in a stage where people have to get creative. I don't see the prices coming down dramatically. That people think it's going to be like a '08 crash. Like none of that's going to happen. That's all clickbait, right? The prices are going down in specific markets, but they're still higher than they were 4 or 5 years ago. So we're in a pretty interesting dilemma right now, to be honest with you. And, the Fed did decrease the rates. However, mortgage interest rates haven't responded to that just yet. And if they do decrease, it's not going to be like they decrease by a whole point in 30 days. It's not what's going to happen. And so a lot of people are excited, which I get, right? But I don't think we should celebrate too soon because we don't know how much mortgage interest rates will drop and when it's going to happen either, because it's not a direct correlation. It's related, but just because that dropped half a point does not mean interest rates for mortgages are going to drop half a point next week.
No, I definitely feel you on that. And there's a whole raft and host of reasons why that is, which that'd be a whole different podcast episode. Let's talk about. And I know you're well versed on it. I am as well. I kind of studied those kind of issues. So,
Yeah.
very good to hear that. Here's this is probably like a off the wall kind of question, but I just wanted to pose it to you and see what you would say. Have you thought about, you do out of state investing? Have you thought about out of country investing in real estate?
The thought has come up, but it hasn't gotten past the thought. Like there's like stuff I watch on YouTube. There's stuff I watch on YouTube, people investing in other countries and things of that nature. I'll be honest with you. I'm just afraid of getting scammed if I did do that, because there's a lot of horror stories, but there's horror stories for everything, right? So I think if I did consider that, I would need to get past the mental block that I have and just the fear of getting scammed. However, I would never tell anybody not to look into it because there's opportunities everywhere. It's just really a matter of having people you can trust in those areas, because we're in a world right now where people will just take your money.
Yeah.
And as somebody living in a different country, buying somewhere, I'm not sure how much protection someone would have being a foreigner trying to do things. So I don't. You just have to know the ins and outs and be comfortable with everything and protect yourself to the greatest extent possible. But it's something I've thought about. It's kind of like it's kind of like one of those things I watch from the sidelines, right? Like I said, like I watch a ton of stuff on YouTube and different things, but I don't know. Maybe I'll get into it one day. Maybe not. But I would never tell anybody you shouldn't. I would just say be as careful as you can.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I could probably talk to you for another hour or two. We don't have that much time. So that was my last question, man. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know y'all probably about to get ready to talk about the podcast. I definitely have already looked up your podcast. I will be listening and subscribing. So keep
Thank
up
you. I
the good
appreciate
work,
that.
man. Appreciate you coming out and definitely spending some time with us. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's good to be on this side because I could just come. I could show up and talk. The hard job is on your side.
Yeah. You can see Corey. He's like, nah, I got it. I'm good with this. So I'll let him take it. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So let's talk about Black Real Estate Dialogue, brother. Let's talk about the podcast for brothers that have never heard of it. Let's talk about it.
Absolutely. So I started Black Real Estate Dialogue 5 years ago. And the reason I started is because if you go back to earlier in the conversation, I was talking about I spent a year trying to figure all this real estate stuff out. And naturally, I started listening to different podcasts, and a lot of it was good information, but I couldn't relate to 95% of the people giving the information. And I was like, there has to be Black people out here doing all these things that I'm learning about. And so I'm like, you know what? Let me start a podcast of my own. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about none of this online stuff. I barely knew how to use social media, right? But I knew in my heart I wanted to find these people who are doing these things in our community and share their stories. And we've evolved to do a lot of other things in addition to that, but that was the start of it. And it's really just been a joy to give a platform to people who want to share their stories and want to give tips not only to our community but to the world to get into real estate and be inspired and be encouraged. And it's been great. I've been able to really build some awesome relationships and meet some really good people. And it's been awesome. It's been awesome. People have gained a whole lot of value out of it. And I'm looking forward to growth and like the next phase of what I'm trying to do creatively. But it's been awesome. But that was the start of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, man. Because when I was looking you up, I said, wow, 2023 Plutus Award for Best Real Estate Content. Let me check this out right now. And I was like, oh, okay. I see
Thank you.
why. So let's talk about obviously it's real estate content, but as far as setting up, because a lot of people that have podcasts, they say, okay, it's easy to just turn the camera on, turn the light on and record, but the content is the most important element that grabs subscribers, that grabs listeners. So what advice would you give for brothers that have podcasts or that may want to set one up? Hell, I'll even take some advice as well, as far as because I mean, for me, content is where the challenge comes in. But I like that your content, like the way you set it up, it's like in a very unique way of presenting. You know what I mean? So, what advice would you give to brothers out there that want to get into this niche, but they're struggling with the content if they're not an expert?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing I would say is you don't have to be an expert in doing this whole content stuff because I keep everything up. So if you scroll back, I mean, this is if you're bored. If you scroll back like all the way to the back, like you'll see my stuff didn't sound that great, it didn't look that great, but I started with what I knew and what I had, right? So the first thing that I would actually encourage is to whatever your subject matter is, let's just say it's men's grooming or something like that. Look at the people who are doing that, right? And see where the gaps are. What aren't they doing? What is a different way that I could deliver this information from the perspective of myself or whoever, you are representing or highlighting? So I would do that first and just try to find a competitive advantage on what you could do in the space. The second thing I would do, and this is something I wish I did in the beginning, but I didn't do really until like a year ago, is leverage YouTube and take it seriously. Because, in my opinion, that's the greatest way to reach new people in an organic manner. That's the greatest way to reach new customers if you have something to sell or to promote. And YouTube is not the future, YouTube is now. And so I would hyper focus on YouTube first and foremost. It's hard, putting everything together and planning and all those things. But think about it this way: most people are not willing to put the effort into get good at it, right? And so if you are and you're consistent, you're already ahead of most people who wouldn't even start or wouldn't be consistent because they're too intimidated, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. So I would say look for a competitive advantage, look at who else is in the space doing something similar because nobody's idea is 100% original. Some element of it might be, but you're not probably not the first person who's thought what you're thinking about. The second thing I would do is take YouTube seriously, build your audience, build your content. And then as far as social media, you can't be everywhere. So I would pick one thing and try to get good at it and study it. So whether that's going to be Instagram, whether that's going to be TikTok, don't worry about being everywhere. You cannot be everywhere. It's just not sustainable. Maybe one day you'll get to a point where you can, leverage other people, things like that. But I would say don't take on too much and keep it simple. Keep it simple. You don't have to be perfect starting out. People won't like hearing this, but some people are too smart for their own good. And what I mean by that is I know so many people who are academically, dean's list people, cum laude and all the laudes and all those things, top of their class, excellent person at work, excellent employee. They do their thing. But the things that they really want to do, they don't do. And the reason for that is they're too smart. They analyze too much. They think themselves out of doing things, right? There's a balance between doing your due diligence and getting so caught up in the weeds where you're using that as an excuse and a crutch to not do anything. I know so many people who are like that. You don't want to be like that. You got to start imperfectly. If you look at any of your favorite content creators, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, whatever, let's just say YouTube, go to the videos, click oldest. I guarantee you it's trash if they kept it up, right? It's trash because you get better over time. People try to be perfect and you're getting in your own way when you try to do that. So that would be my encouragement. So just to recap, find your competitive advantage, see what people in the space in your niche category, et cetera, are doing. Take YouTube serious. Pick one social media platform to start with because you can't be everywhere. And the last thing is don't be too smart. Don't be so smart that you don't do anything because a lot of people in the world are too smart for their own good.
Wow, great information, man. And let's talk about the social media for a minute because we're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and then Instagram's got this new app built in, and I'm sitting here like, okay, I'm not wasting, but because I enjoy doing this, but it's like I'm taking a lot of time editing the whole, podcast, edit the clips. Okay, let me put it on Instagram, let me put it on TikTok, let me put it on Facebook, let me put the whole thing in the shorts on YouTube. You're like, man, now I have to put it on so many more platforms. So I'm glad you said that because I felt like it was kind of like I was trying to do all of them, but I just noticed with Black Men Sundays, the Instagram and the TikTok does the best. But it's weird though, because I have more Instagram followers than I have TikTok followers, but the engagement, like I only have 1,400 followers on TikTok, but the engagement is way higher versus I have 15,000 on Instagram and the engagement is random, but the TikTok is every time I post something, people are talking about it, they're sharing it, people are getting arguments on it. So I'm like, should I focus more of time on the TikTok than the Instagram or what? So that's where my dilemma's been coming, and that's why I was like, I'm gonna ask him this when he comes on the show.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And I would say thank you. And also something else that could be of assistance is like leveraging AI, which you're probably already doing to some extent. But there are different apps where they allow you to post multiple places. I don't remember the names, but they allow you to post multiple places at once, or to schedule things out, things of that nature. There's like different software that allows you to like cut up clips, like, or it'll do clips automatically. So, think Opus, Video.ai. There's like a ton. So that could be something else to help with efficiency too, because that's something I struggle with as well. I'll be honest, I get burned out a lot just on the content stuff. Like it's a lot, right? Just having to think of something and put things out. But the good thing is there's a lot of AI tools to help make that a little bit easier. So I would look into that too.
I got you. Yeah, see, me with the AI, it's kind of a struggle because I still have a Rolodex, man, and it's not a digital Rolodex. I still write in my
Got you,
Rolodex. So
got you.
when I'm editing, I like to edit my clips. I like to
Mm,
get a vibe and a feel for it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like for me using the AI, I haven't done that because I
yeah,
have that old school. Plus, I'm a professional news editor. So,
right.
this is pretty fun for me. The fact that I'm doing this for myself, for all the brothers and sisters out there, but it's, okay, cool. So I have two more questions for you, then I'm gonna let you go, man. Are you enjoying yourself on Black Men Sundays?
Oh, it's a blast, man. I always love coming on, and I'm hoping I can help somebody with the information today. But yeah, it's been a blast. Great, really great and insightful questions. Some people don't ask good questions. Yeah, your questions have been on point, like in depth. Like, I love explaining things, as you can see. So I appreciate the questions that you ask. I really do.
Definitely. I appreciate that. And I'm gonna leave you. I have this one last question, then I promise we're gonna go because I know y'all want to watch some football. I was doing some research on you, outside of what your publicist sent me, and I saw you had an accelerator strategy to build generational wealth. I said, I'm gonna ask him about that on the show. So let's go.
Yes, yes. So what you're talking about is so I do a little bit of coaching, like for folks who want to get into investing out of state. And a lot of it is like what I spoke about today. But essentially, the importance of choosing the right city, building the right team, asking the right questions, right? Because when you call up a real estate agent, you want to make sure you're asking the right questions. And I'll give an example of some of those questions. So, hey, just if you're trying to invest out of state, how many out of state investors have you worked with? Is this your specialty? How do you usually do the showings or the walkthroughs rather? How do you usually communicate, and just really getting questions about their experience and what they've been able to do. And similarly, you're going to want to ask the property manager questions as well. So questions centered around, how to build your team correctly, how to choose the right city, what type of property you're looking for, whether it's single family or 2 to 4 units, what your strategy is, how much money do you have, like what's your plan. So the accelerator strategy is really just kind of tying up all those things, and whoever I'm working with at a particular time, like that's what we do at the outset, so we have kind of like a roadmap for how we're going to go forward. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I want to say Sam Dolcine, thanks for coming on Black Men Sundays. We enjoyed you. We enjoyed your time. For brothers and sisters out here, that want to contact you, what are your Instagram handles? How can we listen to Black Real Estate Dialogue?
Yes. So Instagram is Black Real Estate Dialogue, and same thing on any other social media platform. I would say most active on Instagram. And then if you want to listen or watch, you can go to Apple, Spotify, just type in Black Real Estate Dialogue. You'll see me, or go to YouTube. YouTube has been a big focus this year, and it's been a lot of fun just getting on there and trying some different things. Black Real Estate Dialogue on YouTube as well, and hopefully this helps somebody out there. And if you have further questions, or if there's another way I can be of assistance to you, feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to help you the best way I can.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Sam Dolcine, man. Thanks for coming on Black Men Sundays. Like I said, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and enjoy your work week, brother.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. A great way to start the week, and I've been looking forward to this. So I really appreciate you.
It's a Black Man Sunday. Time to put on childish things.